Hi, I just wanted to welcome everyone to another of our 60th anniversary InConversation talks. Really lucky today to be joined by two alum, Umra Omar and Louise Leakey from the classes of 2002 and 1990. Thank you for joining us. Before I hand it over to Louise, who will be sort of the host for the talk, just run through a few sort of housekeeping points. As mentioned, this is being recorded and it will be shared on our YouTube channel. There you'll be able to see any of the past InConversations we've done. Also, during the sort of the first half, if you could sort of just stay on mute, that'd be brilliant, just so that we sort of don't have any audio issues. And the second half of the talk will be sort of a Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout, please do just pop it in the chat function along the bottom. And we'll try to get through as many of them as we can. These usually last for about an hour, but sort of we sort of see how it goes with the questions. And with that, I'll hand over to Louise. I just want to say thank you again for this, and we hope everyone enjoys.
Thank you for that introduction. So actually, Umra and my family go back quite not well before UWC, where I spent many holidays of my young self with my parents in Lamu on the Kenya coast. So it's a very familiar place to both of us. And your family, Umra, come from Chundwa, Pate, all the islands of the Lamu archipelago. So I think the first thing to do, which would be really helpful to everyone, is to sort of set the scene, give everyone a sense of your background and in this part of the world where you spent your early years and what some of your early childhood memories might have been.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith, for making this happen. Thank you, Louise, for accepting to show up today despite me asking for your permission. So no, this is a very special honor. And to everyone joining in, I say hello, hamjambo. And Lamu is home. And that's where we kind of have had the strongest roots to allow us to have the biggest branches, I would say. It's the oldest settlement in Eastern Africa, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's a paradise as much as it is a nightmare. We have, this bipolar existence of, ultimate peace and serenity on the archipelago. And then there's the complications of being by the Somali border, having very remote communities in the region as well. So going back all the way to the early 8th century, this has been the reality, and we call it home, and we call it at the same time a space of Kenya that has been historically marginalized.
Yeah, really, it's an amazing place. Lamu, I mean, there's nowhere quite like it, I think, although it's changed in recent years with the island, which for when we were there, no cars, just sailboats. Now you have vehicles and motorbikes, which are a plague, and it's obviously with tourism comes all sorts of development, and it's not the Lamu that I think I remember as a youngster. But we spent a lot of time sailing as children, and your father, I think, was roped into many of the early journeys in some quite wild trips up the Kenya coast with my father's boat that he sort of brought in. So many of our early interactions, I think, would have been on boats. I think, can you share your memories of some of those early days?
So being very young and looking up to you as that older sister that I never had, I can only remember stories from my mother's version, which was how reckless your dad and my dad were, sailing out without functioning compass points and just overloaded crates of beer headed to Seychelles. while I was very, very, very young. So it's quite interesting to see how this relationship between your dad, Richard Leakey, my dad, Omar Bwana, you know, from this super atheist to this super Muslim worlds emerging, and how the emphasis was always humanity, and that I think Uncle Richard is actually the chosen godfather, which puzzled many. Is like, why would Mr. Omari, you know, not be having this sheikh or something be my godfather? And it was actually because of him and that relationship. It was because of those sailing experiences that I think I myself ended up in the United World College. You having gone there yourself, Samira was there, and never in my life did I ever dream that I would have the opportunity of going, not let alone going abroad, but going to school like the United World College. And it was because of him that that legend was passed on, and my dad was kind of convinced that, okay, we have to get Umra out and give her that experience, because she checks the boxes of UWC, from the community aspect, from humanitarian work, from the outdoors experiences as well. And I think if it wasn't your dad, not I think, I know if it wasn't for him, UWC would not have happened.
And I've just got one thing that I associate really strongly with my memories as a child, with your parents coming to visit us from Chundra, and they would always bring with them a little bag of this very special bread called ho-ho. And it's not made anywhere else in the world as far as I know, and I think that it's kind of a fun thing to share with this audience as well. Just briefly touch on ho-ho the food rather than ho-ho the boat.
How do you describe something that you never find anywhere in the world? It's kind of, it's more than like the Louis Vuitton of pancakes kind of thing. It's like the thinnest crepe in the world, that is made on an upside down pan. So it's like the pot has like a bum on top of it. And then it's from coconut palm, like wine, just before it ferments. And then you use a feather. That's how thin it is. Like, you don't use a spatula or anything. You apply it with a feather, and it can only stay for like 3 seconds on the fire. And then you take it out with a toothpick because it's so skinny. So it's quite, it's like an art. And for me, it's a symbol of origins that kind of, unfortunately, a lot of them get fizzled away over time, over this desensitization in our globalized world. And so ho-ho is that delicacy that until today, my parents only make the effort, especially my mom, to share with the very, very close friends and family. My dad went on to have a big sailboat that he called ho-ho. And then recently, when I moved to Lamu, I tried to name my house ho-ho, which was very controversial because everyone's like, okay, Umra, Americans would just go ho, 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 ho. And, it would kill the beach element, and Santa Claus would be all over it. So ho-ho is definitely a delicacy that maybe some of us here on maybe Bjorn one day will come to Lamu and get to taste it.
Oh, thanks, Umra, for that. So the other things that, so our parents were, obviously, you can hear from this discussion, very good friends, but they were also very committed Kenyans. So they worked with government, both at a very high level, but also sort of local leadership. My father was, for a decade or so, director of the National Museums of Kenya, which is where your father worked with him at that time, overseeing all the coastal monuments and museums. Your mother, they've just got married, and off she went to the States to complete her studies, which was, very forward thinking, I think, at the time of your father to sort of let her go off to do that. And then she came back and worked at the Kenya Wildlife Service, which is where my father then moved on to, before they got on to all sorts of other things. So can you sort of touch a little bit on that and how they raised you and your sisters to be sort of global citizens and they must have had a really big influence on you?
It's definitely a full circle thing, because I look at myself as the first of 3 daughters. And then I look at Uncle Richard as having had only daughters as well. And I'm seeing these men who have raised strong girls, and they're married to equally, not equally, actually, much stronger wives as well. So there's first just this general, like, strong feminist setup of not being threatened by the power of women, but instead nurturing it to the full potential. My father's considered a crazy man, how he would marry a young woman, have 2 little kids under 2, and then let her go to America, which was like totally unheard of. It's usually the opposite, men from my culture, they get married and then they ask their women to stop working, or actually they marry women who are not educated and are not, in the workforce at all. For her to return after 4 years as, one of the few, let alone women, but few people from where we come from in Lamu to be IT specialists, to come on back to KWS and push the organization to that next level. I look at your mom, Louise Leakey, an absolute legend, and these strong women who kind of have taken a back seat, for that matter. And then later on, moving from that professional angle and pushing the education to the highest echelons of what we're doing, we got to see the back end of politics, which I never imagined would make a full circle, because your dad starting Safina Party together with mom and dad in that fold. My first job was, it was not throwing newspapers, it was actually writing invitation cards to the launch of that political party. It was in 1991, I think. So it was kind of, now today is when I'm seeing how maybe that subconsciously influenced the trajectory that life ended up taking more recently, and being thrusted into politics. And even before that, having a younger sister who, after studying in Stony Brook, her MPH, moved all the way to Lamu, worked in government in Lamu County, and really opened those doors of seeing how we could create these spaces and break these so-called glass ceilings, and as literally pushing the barriers at home.
Yeah, no, it's quite, there's a lot of stories from those early days of Safina. So it was a single part. Kenya obviously was, for everyone who wants the little background, it was a single party state for many years, and this was really the beginning of multi-partyism. So that political party, which was founded really after frustration, I think, with my father working for the Kenya Wildlife Service and deciding that they couldn't fix these bigger problems, so he needed to then form a political party and get into government to try to address them. And so that's what sort of the origins of Safina. And Safina is it's a boat. It's like a symbolic ark that would then sort of sail in, and you could join it to make change. And I remember painting a big banner on fabric, which sort of we hung off a rally in Uhuru Park, and we threw leaflets out of buses, and it was quite a wild time in those days. So that it's fun to hear that your involvement was really also very much at the beginning of it too there. So then you went on to UWC. You were there, what, 2000 to 2002, somewhat after that. Is that right?
Yeah, class of 2002.
So you heard about it just through us having been there, and then applied and joined it. Give us a little bit of insight into what led you there, and
probably hands down the best day ever. It was I remember that just coming in with the form and going, do you want to go to the UWC? And I thought it was a prank. I checked if it was the 1st of April. and it was true. And it was because of Uncle Richard. And then there's a lady, he had a family he had convinced to take me on, because I remember at that time it was only open to the national, through the national committee, and going in for an interview at the National Museum of Kenya and getting in. And that was like literally the game changer in life, I think, education wise, personally, getting onto that plane into Heathrow, getting onto that bus, I remember, and every time looking behind me as if, you know, thinking that I would be pinched and I would have to get out from that dream. So it was because of you guys that we ended up there as well.
So that was Atlantic College, right?
Atlantic College, yeah. Wales. I remember just a lot of sheep as we were driving to school, like a lot of sheep.
It must have been quite a contrast from your world, that's for sure. Anyway, so, and then obviously you got back, you went on, you did amazing things with your education, and eventually brought you back to Kenya. I mean, you've done so many things, Umra, but let's cut to your time when you founded Safari Doctors, and how, you know, how that began, and the vision that you have for that project, and sort of, and the impact that it's having today. So I think if anyone wants to follow Safari Doctors on Instagram, it's wonderful to read the social media posts there. And it's a really influential organization on the Kenya coast. So give us some insight into that and how it all came about.
There was, after all the schooling from going to UWC, then doing my undergrad in the sciences, and then master's in social justice, there was just this theme that kept on coming back. And one of it I have to highlight was the impact of the Jill Longson and I think Colin that sponsored the Go Mad project at the UWC, Go Make a Difference. And as a recipient of that in 2002, right after graduation. And I went back home. I remember it was £1,000 grant that you could, our project was around awareness around HIV/AIDS. And I went home, and it was amazing how you're able, like, you can pull in and capitalize on so many resources and partnerships in order to make an impact. And by that, I mean, it was only £1,000, but we were able to put up a function that was valued, you know, more than 10 times of what we received. Went to the newspaper, the biggest newspaper in the country, and they gave us like free awareness ads that we could do. We went to Kenya's biggest mall, and they gave us a venue to do a health promotion event at no cost. We went to the textbook center. We got, you know, so it was like, because of this vision, you're able to pull in various partners and stakeholders beyond what maybe the scope of what you had in mind. And that's what happened, I would say, with Safari Doctors, is that after 2 years of working at the Open Society around health and human rights, I got really frustrated that I was not in the trenches, basically not implementing. We were just facilitating grants and implementers. So I remember resigning, and my family thought I was crazy. My coworkers thought I was more crazy, and I thought I'd just lost it myself. And the whole idea is that, you know, I had to be on the ground doing something at the community level. And that's when I came across a former UWC graduate who started this project in Lamu around traveling and delivering healthcare. And we got the worst terror attack in 2014, where we had some major Al-Shabaab attacks, killed over, 100 young men in Lamu County. And at that time, everyone fled. Everyone was leaving. The health organization, government wasn't going into particular areas. And that's when Safari Doctors decided we would do the opposite. We would get a local team and we would go into the regions that people were leaving. We would use that grassroots rapport from the chiefs, the security officers, and all we had to do was get a nurse on a motorbike to take healthcare to where it was needed. Started off with just 6 villages that were affected by the attacks. And we did that for a year. I was like, Umra, we just have to do this for 1 year in order to be able to measure our impact and then decide what happens after that. Long story short, the following year, we got a nomination and part of a CNN Heroes Award, and that just opened a can of worms. It was, okay, this is no longer just a project that you're doing personally. There's a spotlight on it. There's resources that have been thrown on your way. You need to put in the systems. We needed to scale. So starting with 1 nurse, 6 villages, 100 patients a month. Today we have a staff of 15. We go to about 24 villages. We see about 3,000 humans and about 500 animals every month, and are now building Lamu's first private not-for-profit hospital. That's a 52-bed capacity. So the narrative is also around training young people as health workers. We're talking of Africa having a huge population that's young people, and health prevention is what we're really now pushing for in order to work towards universal healthcare. Long-winded discussion is that that's where we are now.
Well, many congratulations. I follow it closely. I'm just always so impressed about how much you've achieved on that front. And so the Kenya coast and where we have such affection, what we have such affection for, and the future of that coastline, it's one of those most intact, pristine places in some respects still, yet with the impact of increased population around the world, but particularly in these coastal cities, obviously a lot of this is under threat now. And I know you've got 2 young, wonderful, beautiful children, Aza and Bwana, and we worry a lot about the future of our children and how to make the world a better place for them. Your sister as well, Samia, who you mentioned briefly, was very involved in leading this very strong campaign against sort of the coal plant, which some people will have heard about. There was plans to construct a major coal plant north of Lamu. And she then sort of, as a county official, led this campaign against the coal plant. I think you touched on it briefly about sort of women having a leadership role on the coast. Can you touch briefly on that and the sort of grassroots effort that she was involved in that turned that coal plant around?
What Samia actually, my younger sister, and with the brains of my baby sister, kicked off what they call decolonize campaign with the team of, with local grassroots NGO, with international partners. We have Save Lamu. There is Natural Justice as well. And it was quite amazing to see how these grassroots-led organizations with women on the front line were able to go to court, were able to mobilize on the ground, promote awareness, and put a stop to what was going to be one of the deadliest projects in Lamu. This is no different from the struggles that we see in the Amazon, what we see with Native Americans suffering in the US, and oil pipelines and spills happening. So that collective pursuit for environmental justice, I think for me is what I definitely hold my sister very highly towards. To be the youngest woman mother in government, and to resign because of this stance. In Kenya, people don't resign, what they call their plum positions, and how dare you go against your boss. I remember that was something that was all over the headlines at home, where, you know, cabinet county executive resigns because the government is not being transparent in the process. So that when there's Lamu's also facing, you know, the Lapset, the biggest port in Eastern Africa, again, having a collective effort as a family, as young sisters, to have a voice and be able to push that voice forward, where there's that collective responsibility, has been a couple of things that I would say I'm very proud of especially my younger siblings. And the fight continues in all other forms and shapes, in pushing for, you know, the fishermen. There's the fishermen compensation, there's the land rights issues. For me, it's been mainly around health and creating opportunities for the younger population that right now are on the fringes of our development pursuits.
Yeah, no, there's obviously climate change is such a big global narrative, and there's a lot being done at the grassroots level in Kenya, but a lot of visibility, particularly on the coastal efforts led by, as you said, strong ladies, strong women. And I just wanted you to also briefly touch on your mother's work with the flippy floppies and flip flops and Unico, because I think that's another amazing project that should be shared.
By the time we were, you know, grown up and feeling like we were doing our share, we realized that, you know, people like Mom have been doing and continue to do their share, even be behind the screen. So you have all these, I would say, undercover mother revolutionaries. For her, I was quite surprised when I put the dots together, is that she has been part of a recycling project where they use plastic waste that comes into the shores of Kiwayu. Like you see flip-flops coming in all the way from as far as, you know, the Asian waters. And it's called, it went on to grow from Unico to Seoul, and to now recently, where they had the biggest plastic project in Lamu, where they literally built a boat, a sailboat out of plastic that sailed all the way to Zanzibar, just to highlight the magnitude of the waste and also the possibilities and importance of, you know, recycle, reuse, repurpose. And that's something that we see the coastal community struggling with, is marine waste pollution. So for me, I was very proud when I found the linkage going as back as to the project that my mom was doing with women from the islands alongside her colleague. I remember Julie Church, and pushing for these kind of projects. And today it's something that's very alive and you know, picking up steam in Lamu.
Yes. Yeah, so it's a really good initiative, that as well. So I don't want to take everybody's time, because I'm sure people have questions, but your decision to run as a governor for Lamu in the last election was not surprising, I guess, but it's very courageous, I think, and you picked up tremendous support. And can you give us some insight into that campaign? And you obviously didn't get through to that position, but I think it's really, I can't express how much courage and commitment and time that would have taken, and I'm sure you're utterly exhausted from that period. But it was, you know, it was really happening, and I think it's really commendable that you did that. But please share some of your insights into that campaign and your experience, and what made you do it.
It was an overdose of the UWC spirit. Absolute overdose. It's full circle. I am looking in hindsight, you know, I ran on Safina Party, which I think if Pops was alive, bless his soul, would have laughed in my face probably. And 2 years of campaigning, wow, it was brutal. It was probably one of the most brutal experiences. I think giving birth is easier than running politics in Kenya. It was wow. So the idea, how did it come along? I'll tell you exactly how it came. My husband then, I remember it was a Sunday and we're just relaxing at home, and I get a phone call from a politician who wanted safari doctors to help out with some medical evacuation. Mind you, we've been working in his constituency for like 6, 7 years, and not a single day was there even a phone call of like, Umra, we see, what are you guys doing, or nothing, never an acknowledgement. Less than a month later, another phone call from another politician, same region, again requiring assistance from safari doctors. And my husband goes like, guess what? I think you need to take their job. I think you need to fire them, because they should not be asking for assistance from a small community-based organizations. It's the other way around. And so we started talking about what would be the best way to fire them. And the best way was the gubernatorial seat. That's the most senior position. That's where the resources are. That's where management is. And lo and behold, that's what happened. So we just, I remember my mom traumatized, she was livid, and I had to pull the Safina card, and I was like, you guys did it. Uncle Richard was going for office, and I didn't stop you when you were doing it. And a year later, they're like, okay, I guess Umra is serious. She's actually doing this. And they literally became like the kitchen cabinet and put everything together, seeing my mom on a computer with, analyzing all the data, my dad going on a podium and, reliving his young political days was amazing. So the best thing that came out of it was the family just really coming together behind it. It was the perfect loss. We got 11% of the vote, which was the most that any newcomer has ever gotten in politics, compared to the less than 1%. And we vied against the former governor and who was the current governor then. And it was dirty, 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 dirty all the way, as much as it was hopeful, inspiring, awakening, and seeing like the young people come to the front line, issues around the environment being highlighted, which were not like on the agenda of any other politician. It's seeing how we could mobilize like a super like grassroots movement, door to door, sit and understand the issues. And I just feel very, very privileged on how much I've gotten to learn and receive from the people of Lamu.
Yeah, well, we were very proud of you watching you do that and rallying for you as well. But so Umra, the big question, what are you doing now? What's your next big ambitious project? Or are you working on something, or are you taking a break? What's happening? And then we'll hand it over to the floor for questions.
I have to divulge in this group therapy session at the UWC. I'm breathing, which is very exciting. I have 2 little kids that missed out on me for 2 years. So we kind of just taken a hiatus I'm in Portugal right now doing my doctorate and recouping, and behind the scenes, did I mention it to you, Louise? I think we're creating the machinery to kind of go and knock them down.
Really fix things. That's what I like to hear. Well done. So I think maybe we should turn it over to the floor for some questions, because we've had quite a good conversation. I'm sure there's many thoughts that may have come to mind of things that people would like you to expand on. But let's hand it over. So are we doing these questions from the chat, Pete, or are you going to?
Yes, so people have popped a few questions in the chat, but we normally sort of just pass it over them, ask them to unmute themselves.
Okay.
It's usually sometimes when they sort of write the questions, it's a bit not as clear as when they sort of share themselves. So I think maybe Alberto, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? He might not be there, so I'll just run through it for you. First of all, I wanted to thank Umra for her work. Secondly, you want to know if you could recommend some books or documentaries on Kenyan history, politics. And thirdly, you would like to know what projects dealing with the actual environmental challenges that you might recommend, and what is public opinion in Kenya on the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine? Quite a big question.
Yeah. So, and then there's ICMTS as well, on how can they help with safari doctors, and is Kenya politics progressing in the right direction to improve the quality of life? So thank you, Alberta from Spain. Muchísimas gracias para tu pregunta. Y la primera se dice que recommending some books, documentaries, or videos on Kenyan history, politics, and economics, main challenges. So obviously, I'm a big fan of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, that gives a lot of historical context around Kenyan, both fiction and nonfiction. And then you have the book of It's Our Turn to Eat. On top of my head, I don't have the author. Is it Spear? But the title is it's.
Michaela Wrong book.
Yes, it is. And recently there's a documentary released, which is a little bit more modern, and it's called Softie, SOFTIE, by Boniface Mwangi, and his experience running for Member of Parliament. And then at the end of the year, maybe we'll share the documentary right now called Umra. We're very, very, very fortunate to have had some amazing documentarians, like literally capture the whole journey behind the scene. Even I'm scared to see it when it comes out, although I was there in every single moment of it. So that's on that side. And the actual I'll just jump to the last question and then go on to the environmental, which I think we kind of touched on. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine, honestly, it's a little bit controversial. The one man's freedom fighter, another man's terrorist is the situation. You've heard the likes of Julius Malema, where they say, Putin is welcome here, because where was America when they were fighting apartheid kind of situation? Where was, so it's a little bit interesting on how Africa is not necessarily taking hard lines, trying to be neutral, except in the UN. I know Kenya clearly siding on the Ukrainian side, but I think on the continent it's rather divided. Environmental challenges right now, it's global. It's not just Kenya. It's not just Africa. We contribute the least to the carbon emissions, but suffer the most. Right now, there's a lot of entities dealing with various issues. We have community conservancies like the Northern Rangeland Trust, amongst others, that work on some of these issues. We have community-based organizations like, as I mentioned, I'm biased, I would say Save Lamu at home is what's dealing with the environmental issues in Lamu. Is Kenyan politics progressing in the right direction? Every day is a needle pushed, or else some of us wouldn't jump into those murky waters. There's a need for the middle class to get uncomfortable, because I think right now it's such a bipolar. It's those that want to maintain the status quo, the 1%, and then on the backs of the very poor or the very suffering, which you see across the globe, is that there is a passive middle class that needs to take a stance in politics.
Cool, perfect, thank you. I actually had a question about safari doctors. What's the future for it? I mean, is there plans to potentially bring it out to other areas, other regions outside of Kenya, away from the coast?
So the exciting thing, Keith, about safari doctors is that from the very beginning, it's been a very organic process and growth. Like I said, when we started with 10 villages and then the demand. Right now, we're in the process of talking with Grand Challenges Canada for us to transition to scaling. So that looks like a functional hospital. It looks like having a wider workforce of youth health ambassadors and investing more in preventative care. And more exciting is that we just had a colleague reach out from Zambia who was like, we want to create a chapter of safari doctors in Zambia. And we're like, okay, here's the blueprint, here's the model. And that's not something we intentionally planned for. It just came off of a conversation and communicating. So that's what we're doing right now is an MOU for Safari Doctors Zambia. Would have never imagined it. So in the future, it just looks like a refined model that can be replicated and scaled, almost like I don't like the word franchise. It's been so hijacked by McDonald's, but yeah, something along those lines.
How do you find funding it and operating the business works? And I guess what's, and not use the word franchises you just used, but, what's stopping you from providing healthcare to more?
Mm-hmm. The issue is that word sustainability that comes up every time, because right now we are primarily a donor-driven organization. We hope that once the hospital is open and running, it would at least offset some of the basic and overhead costs. So you see that sometimes you have to scale up or scale down based on resources. And I think funding is just it's a problem we see across the board, all the way, even the United Nations cries that they don't have enough funding because you're always wanting to do more. But we've been fortunate of coming out of a very dark area, I think, during the pandemic, and to now being able to pace ourselves as an organization as far as funding is concerned. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. I don't know if anyone else has any questions, any other questions. Feel free to sort of unmute yourself and sort of ask.
How long are you in Portugal for?
Oh, are you coming to visit?
Yeah, or you can go to Norway, then you can see a lot of people.
You should. I'm just starting my school in May. I'll be here definitely for a couple of years, but I go back and forth, like at least on a quarterly basis, because my work is still primarily the back end of Safari Doctors. Just that this allows me the space to work on that more strategically as opposed to from LAMO, which is the program implementation. So you're welcome anytime.
You may find us there.
There you go.
Cool. Perfect. Well, I think if we haven't got any other questions, I just want to say thank you, Umra and Louise. It's been a really inspiring and a brilliant talk. And thank you to everyone for joining. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any follow-up questions, or if you think anything down the line, do drop us a note and we can pass that on and get back to you. But otherwise, as I mentioned, this has been recorded, and so will be shared on our YouTube channel, so you can sort of watch it back. But just want to say once again, thank you, Louise. Thank you, Umra. It's been really great, and we really appreciate you guys joining us.
And thank you, guys. And Gonzalo, I do see the message. I've saved your email. I'll see you in Spain. Louise, fun to meet.
And good luck to your next big lectures. We're watching with bated breath now.
You too. And I just want to take this moment to directly recognize the late Dr. Richard Leakey for this platform opportunity for you. And thank you so much to also everyone on board.
Thank you, Umra. That's very kind. All right.
Cool, brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you guys are. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.